Hey now, ladies and gentlemen, hour number 3 of the line. Dog995, dog995.com. Donald Trump just wrapping up a question from Peter Ducey. And one of the questions that stuck out for me was, Mr. President, do you believe that the Ayatollah is alive? And he said, we legitimately don't know. But it's very weird that nobody's heard from him or seen him. I think what you've got in that situation is a very, I think you've got a dismembered Ayatollah. I think you've got a guy that's like probably got a leg blown off, or, he's like, wherever he's at, he's in bad shape. And so it's, if that's the case, Iran's in a really bad situation right now. And the question for most of us is kind of, when does this wrap up? Because we all want it done sooner than later. We understand there's objectives and a job that's got to be done. Donald Trump doesn't want to stay there any longer than he has to. But we've decimated them. Now we've got to clean things up to make sure that the world's oil distribution is not going to be interrupted. And they claim on Iran's side that they're only blocking Israeli and American cargo ships that are coming through the Strait of Hormuz, that everybody else gets a pass, but they're only dealing in the Chinese yuan, which I'll explain I'll explain all of that here in a few minutes. Let's go back live to the White House as Trump takes more questions.
And there's a theory. You pounded them to hell, and you could just leave now, and it'll take 10 years for them to build back not nearly what they have right now. And I guess that's another theory, but we want to have it ended so that another president doesn't have. Look, for 47 years, no president was willing to do what I'm doing, and they should have done it a long time ago. It would have been a lot easier. There's no president that wanted to do it, and yet every president knew. I've spoken to a certain president, who I like, actually, a past president, former president. He said, I wish I did it. I wish I did, but they didn't do it. I'm doing it, yeah.
Which president?
I can't tell you that. I don't want to embarrass him. It would be very bad for his career, even though he's got no career left. Go ahead, please.
You mentioned.
How about the man right?
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, you mentioned that you're not entirely sure who you're dealing with, who the leadership is in Iran. Do you see a viable opposition movement still in that country following all of the protests that we had seen before the airstrikes, and kind of an opposition movement that could become a viable leader in Iran?
Well, the biggest problem, and we have brave people in this room, but the biggest problem that I see is that, they put out a warning, and we have the warning. We get everything they get. And it said any protester that goes onto the street will be immediately shot and killed. This is a little tougher than the American way. This is not quite as tough as, nobody can believe it. So I can't imagine. They don't have guns, and the other ones have guns. Highly sophisticated machine guns and AK-47s and other kinds of guns. And they did that with the women. So the women had 250,000, even 500 people protesting a year ago. And they shot women right through the middle of the forehead with snipers. And they didn't have to do many. About 10 went down bleeding profusely. And 250 to 500,000 women went running in the other direction, because they can be brave, but they're not stupid, and they have no gun, and you have snipers in buildings specifically for this reason. So a woman goes down falling, bleeding from the head, and it doesn't take long for that to spread. And when that spreads, that crowd dispenses. And nobody else has been able to do that to the extent that these people are violent. They killed a minimum 2 weeks ago, 32,000 people. So, and they put out actually a notice 2 days ago. If you protest, you will be shot and killed. So, I don't know. I would say Mike Johnson's the only person I know who has the courage to go out in that kind of an atmosphere. I don't think so. Yeah.
Have your advisors told you anything in terms of how long we can expect gas prices as high as they are right now?
I don't need advisors to tell me that. I know what it is. The Prime Minister of UK, United Kingdom, yesterday told me I'm meeting with my team to make a determination. I said, you don't need to meet it with the team. You're the prime minister. You can make your own. Why do you have to meet with your team to find out whether or not you're going to send some minesweepers to us or to send some boats? I said, you don't have to meet with your team. It's the same thing here. I can tell you that when this is over, oil prices are going to go down very, very rapidly. So is inflation, so is everything else. But frankly, much more important than short-term or even long-term oil prices, you can't let the most violent, vicious country in the last 50 years have a nuclear weapon, because the Middle East will be gone. Israel will go first, without question, and they'll certainly take a shot at us before we get our act together and say we got to take them out. You can't let Iran, who's truly a nation of great terror and power. Look what happened in the last 2 weeks. They weren't supposed to go after all these other countries in the Middle East. Those missiles were set to go after them. So they hit Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait. Nobody expected that. We were shocked. And the other one, you know, they fought back. They could have yielded. But think of it, if we weren't around, they had tremendous power. They had thousands of missiles, most of which we've terminated. They had thousands of drones. They were making drones and missiles all over the place. We've knocked out most of those factories. I mean, now they're sending out 2 or 3 missiles. Now, you know, they've still got some. They might have 8% left. But mostly they've been eliminated. They've been terminated by what we did and what Israel did, too. Yeah, please.
Israel is expected to expand its ground offensive in southern Lebanon to go after Hezbollah. Have you discussed that with Israeli leaders?
Yeah.
And does the United States support a potential Israeli invasion of Lebanon?
Yeah, no, I did. And I know look, Hezbollah is a problem. It's been a problem for a long time, not just now. And it's a certain area, because I was with the other night a person whose parents live in Lebanon. This is a very substantial person, wealthy person, whose parents live in Lebanon. I said, really? How do you live in Lebanon? Your parents are living? Oh, yeah, they live there. And over the years, they've gotten used to the fact that it's being bombed. But they explained to me that it's really a different section of Lebanon. It's the section where Hezbollah is. And they get used to it, I guess. I don't know. I mean, people live in Ukraine. You would think they wouldn't live in Ukraine, but they live in Ukraine. I don't know that I'd do that, but they live in Ukraine. They live in Lebanon. Hezbollah is a big problem, and they're rapidly being eliminated. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it.
So there you go. Donald Trump wrapping that up, and a lot of information out there, as the last thing he says is Hezbollah is a problem in Lebanon, and that kind of goes to the bigger picture. But so many different aspects to cover, which I want to do, but just for the sake of having the time to talk to you about it, I'm going to go ahead and break, and then we can regroup and everything else. Here's where I want to start, though. I want to start with a brutal warning that Trump had issued just over the weekend to the freeloading NATO allies, which he noted in that address are a bunch of absolute do-nothing allies that they just don't want to help whatsoever. Some of them have come around slowly but surely. But the warning that he issued to them should be a wake-up call. Trump predicted this, by the way. He said this when we were helping Ukraine and everything else. He said, you know, y'all are out here sending money to places like Ukraine, helping Europe out, but when you need Europe, they're not going to be there for you. And guess who was right again? Trump. Trump always gets it right. 205-545-9950. I got that for you and much more right here on the line. 205-545-9950. Ernest Financial bringing you this part of the show. RetireWithErnest.com. RetireWithErnest.com. My buddy David Ernest out here protecting retirements, man. That's what it's about. And in these crazy times, there's no better opportunity to take advantage of this as you get your retirement protected. And on top of that, your money's growing. And you got a plan for retirement. It's really a no-brainer because it costs you nothing. They don't get fees from you. They get them elsewhere. They just put the plan together for you and make sure all of your stuff is exactly where it needs to be. If you're 55 or older and you got over 50K in your retirement, reach out to David Ernest, my buddy, and let him know I sent you and let him get to work. Even if you just got those questions about it and say, hey, what is it you exactly do? He'll tell you, man. He'll talk to you as long as you need to talk to him. 833-596-7233. That's 833-596-7233. RetireWithErnest.com. Now, before I explain the dire warning that was sent over the weekend, let's go back and listen to what Trump had just said moments ago during that press conference about the NATO allies, about the European countries and their unwillingness to get involved in this conflict.
Done a great job. And when we want to know, do you have any minesweepers? Well, would rather not get involved, sir. I said, for 40 years we're protecting you, and you don't want to get involved in something that is very minor. Very few shots going to be taken because they don't have many shots left. But they said, we'd rather not get involved. I just want the fake news media and everybody else to remember that was said because I've been a big critic of all of the protecting of countries because I know that we'll protect them. And if we ever needed help, they won't be there for us. I've just known that for a long period of time, just like I knew about the Strait, that it would be a weapon.
So he's saying what most of us knew, that when it comes to the European countries, when they need us, it's demanded. And that if we don't help the European countries, we're somehow morally bankrupt. But when we ask the European countries for help, they're nowhere to be found. So that's where, during this interview with the Financial Times, Trump warned that NATO's future could be in jeopardy if the European allies refuse to support the mission aimed at reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran has effectively at least threatened to close. He says, quote, if there's no response, or if it's a negative response, I think it will be very bad for the future of NATO. If you go back to Saturday, Donald Trump asked several countries heavily dependent on Middle Eastern energy, including European powers and Asian allies, to send warships, minesweepers, and air defense assets to protect commercial shipping routes from Iranian threats. That's what he was referring to when he said he hits them up and asked if they want to give us some minesweepers. He puts on Truth Social this: many countries, especially those who are affected by Iran's attempted closure of the Hormuz Strait, will be sending warships in conjunction with the United States of America to keep the strait open and safe. We have already destroyed 100% of Iran's military capability, but it's easy for them to send a drone or two, drop a mine, or deliver a close-range missile somewhere along or in this waterway, no matter how badly defeated they are. Hopefully China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the UK, and others that are affected by this artificial constraint will send ships to that area, so the Hormuz Strait will no longer be a threat by a nation that already has been totally decapitated. In the meantime, the United States will be bombing the hell out of the shoreline and continually shooting Iranian boats and ships out of the water. One way or another, we will soon get the Hormuz Strait open, safe, and free. But so far, as you know, as he noted, many allies have been slow to commit. Here's more from the Financial Times. They said, despite his warning, Trump was pessimistic the U.S. allies would heed his pleas for help. He said, quote, we have a thing called NATO. He said, we've been very sweet. We didn't have to help them with Ukraine. He said, Ukraine is thousands of miles away from us, but we helped them. Now we'll see if they help us, because I've long said that we'll be there for them, but they won't be there for us. And I'm not sure that they'd be there. And he's turning out to, and he said this for years. He's exactly right. Asked to specify the help he needed, Trump said, quote, whatever it takes. He added that allies should send minesweepers, of which Europe possesses many more than the U.S. He also wanted, quote, people who are going to knock out some bad actors that are along the Iranian shore. He implied he wanted European commando teams or other military help to eliminate Iranians making a nuisance in the Gulf with drones and naval mines. He said, we're hitting them very hard. They've got nothing left but to make a little trouble in the strait. But these people are beneficiaries and they ought to help us police it. We'll help them, but they should also be there. You sort of need a lot of people to watch over a few. And Trump's isn't just calling out NATO, he's also pressuring China, which relies heavily on Gulf oil shipments to help reopen the strait, even hinting that he could deploy or could delay, should I say, a planned summit with Xi Jinping if they refuse to assist. He said, quote, I think China should help too, because China gets 90% of its oil from the straits. We'd like to know before that. It's 2 weeks in, a long time. He added that his planned trip to China could also be pushed back, saying we may delay. He doubled down on his warning against U.S. allies. He said, whether we get support or not, but I could say this. I said it to them. We will remember. Now, he says that China, and I don't know if the Financial Times reported this wrong or Trump just misspoke. China gets 90, somewhere between 80% and 90% of the oil from Iran. That does not make up 80 to 90% of China's oil, but they get the vast majority of what comes out of Iran, which will ultimately lead to a good chunk of the oil they get. And the way that breaks down is they get the oil at $8 less per barrel, according to whatever the Brent crude price is, right? So whatever the standard price is, Iran will then sell it to China $8 per barrel cheaper than what the rest of the world is paying. And China has relied heavily on that for years and years and years. So this is, in fact, a problem for them. They should want the Strait of Hormuz open as well. But the way Iran is playing this is they're saying, no. We're going to allow the shipments going to China through the Strait of Hormuz, but it's the U.S. and Israeli shipments that we're going to stop. And that is Iran's way of kind of winking and nodding at not just China, but our European allies and say, don't worry, guys. We'll try to make sure this doesn't affect you. Just don't go help the U.S., which would ultimately lead me to believe that the UK, the European countries, are siding with Iran. Does it seem that way to everybody else, or is that just me? Anyway, Trump has been right all along about all of this, not just with Iran, not just with the European allies, but what could soon be happening in Cuba as well. And I'll give you prime examples of that from decades ago where Trump was speaking on these issues. 205 545 9950 545 9950. Yes, sirree. And also, YouTube's back up. We've been broadcasting on YouTube all day
Yeah.
because John Bird's good at what he does.
Well,
He single-handedly got YouTube working again.
Well, I had to call the, the CEO, but I was able to get through.
The CEO of here, or the CEO of
YouTube. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I've got his number.
You just sent him a quick text.
Yeah, I said, hey man, what's up?
What's up? Get our ish fixed.
Yeah, I said, I work with over the line. They're like, whoa, hey buddy, on it. Boom, 15 minutes later, boom,
that quick.
whoop, there it is.
So before I get further into this, I want to flash back to Citizen Trump and his comments that he's previously made on Cuba, the Carg Islands, and just in general protecting other countries. 26 years ago, Donald Trump was at the what was it? It was some sort of Cuban American conference, and he was asked to speak there. Again, 26 years ago. And with what's going on with Cuba now, and the fact that Donald Trump's alluding to making a move in regards to Cuba because they don't want to play ball, and the Cuban people have suffered for a very long time, even going back to the 26 years. Listen to what he said back then.
Thank you very much. I've had a lot of offers, and sadly, it's all been very recently, to go into Cuba on deals, business deals, real estate and other deals. And I've rejected them on the basis that I will go when Cuba's free. As you know, and the people in this room know better than anyone, putting money and investing money in Cuba right now doesn't go to the people of Cuba. It goes into the pockets of Fidel Castro. He's a murderer. He's a killer. He's a bad guy in every respect. Castro's jails are full of dissidents, as you know very well. His graveyards are full of patriots, and his government is full of thugs. And it's inconceivable to me when I see the weak stance taken by our current administration, especially with the spirit in this room, because the spirit of the Cuban people is beyond any spirit that I've seen by any people, and I've been watching it for a long time. And we can't allow him to get away with this program of coming to this country, hiring our best consultants, hiring our best lobbyists, and all of a sudden, senators and various other people miraculously are on the side of Fidel Castro. And now the battle is almost getting tougher, and it should be a battle that would be won or almost won by now. The point is that things can turn around, and they can turn around very rapidly. I believe that you will have victory. I believe you'll have victory sooner rather than later. And you will win. You are going to win. And I'm going to be down here and I'm going to watch you win. I don't know what capacity I'll be. I'll either be the greatest developer in the country or the greatest president that you've had in a long time. I'm not sure. This trip has been very unusual. I've learned a tremendous amount. Jorge has taken me to I have met more Cubans than I knew existed. And they are great people. And now I'm friends, and I'm going to be here whenever you need me. Right now, I have personally 2 words for him. Thank you very much.
He says, adios, amigo. And that's been a consistent. Donald Trump is the most consistent politician that we've ever seen. Like, it's hard to find him where he's flip-flopped on an issue.
No, he's who he is. And you're right, he hasn't changed.
And one of the things that I love people do all the time, and they've been doing it ever since the early days of Donald Trump running for president back in 2015, they say, Donald Trump, he's actually a Democrat. He's been a Democrat his whole life. And all of a sudden he wants to be a Republican because he wants to enrich himself. Go back to 1987. He's on the Phil Donahue show. And he's talking, and this is the reason for bringing it up in the first place. This is during the Reagan administration. He's talking about how the U.S. should not be protecting other countries for free. that we should at least be charging, and that would change their posture on how they treat us instead of what we've done after for pumping billions and billions of dollars into other countries. And what do we get in? We need them for the Strait of Hormuz. They're nowhere to be found. Again, this is the Phil Don.
Yeah.
Are you affiliated with any political party? So
Well, I'm a Republican, and the Reagan administration of the country after we went through the catastrophe previous to that, but the last couple Reagan
And
unfortunately.
Jim Wright has Democratic committee big in Washington D.C. You turned him down.
That's right.
Boy, I'll tell you. Did you call your father before you turned? Your father is identification of the entrepreneurial spirit partnership with the government that gave housing to all those hardworking blue-collar. Donald is building on Fifth Avenue.
But Phil, you just don't have the programs anymore. Housing.
Talk
I
to
built.
Jim
Hey,
Wright. Maybe he has something to say.
you're right. Maybe you're absolutely right.
But you turned him down.
Can't be defending Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf and everybody else and think that we're going to have low. You have to pay us for the services we're rendering, or this country is going to go right down the tubes, and that is a shame.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
And the losers in all of those situations are the American people. When we sit there and we defend all these other countries and we give to Ukraine and we do this and we do that, and there's nothing in return, the people that lose the most are the American people at the end of the day. He knew that back then. He knows that now. And then to the point of the Karg Islands. The Karg Islands are it's a small island off the coast of Iran, which is north of the Strait of Hormuz, but it's where Iran keeps a lot of its oil that is, kind of important to its overall economy. And if the Karg Islands were to be bombed in any way, shape, or form, then it would be very detrimental to Iran for years and years to come. Back in 1988, now keep in mind what Donald Trump's saying now. He says, I don't want to bomb their oil supply. Don't want to do that because it's going to be very detrimental to them. They will be in very bad shape if we do that. But not taking it off the table. Iran needs to wave the white flag. Once they do, then we could move on and see brighter days. But if they continue to escalate, this is going to be something that is in the cards. In 1988, Trump said the exact same thing. He said what to do about Iran, for instance. He says I'd be harsh on Iran. Yeah, because everybody was always asking him, like, would you run for president? You'd make a great president and everything else. Everybody thought Donald Trump would make a great president until he became president, and then a bunch of people contracted TDS. He says, I'd be harsh on Iran back in 1988. He said, they've been beating us psychologically, making us look like a bunch of fools. One bullet shot at one of our men or ships, and I'd do a number on the Karg Island. I'd go in and take it. Iran can't even beat Iraq, yet they push the United States around. It'd be good for the world to take them on. He said, I'd just go in there and I'd bomb the hell out of it. And why not? Why not? At this point, why not? Now, the big concern for a lot of people, including those of you in this audience, is how long are we going to be there, and when do we see a break on these gas prices? Now, the bad news is the gas prices are what they are. That's the bad news. The good news is this is unlike a spike in gas prices that we've seen previously. When you have a previous spike, say under the Biden administration, this time, 3-4 years ago, there was no end in sight. As the gas prices went up, it was because of the canceling of pipelines. It was because of green energy policies. It was because of a reliance on foreign countries to import our oil instead of concentrating on here at home and the resources that we have that can sustain us for hundreds of years to come. In this situation, it's strictly based on one concentrated area, which is the Strait of Hormuz, and how the markets react to that. The problem with it being in the hands of the Strait of Hormuz, it's also in the hands of the media because the market controls this and the market reacts to just about everything, including media reports. And because we don't have an honest media, they can put out a lie and essentially, in one way or another, affect the price of gas. And that's pretty criminal, which is, I actually got that quote from Donald Trump. He was aboard Air Force One, and he was being asked by reporters about Iranian disinformation. If you've been online, if you've been looking at videos, you're seeing a lot of stuff out there that's not even real. In the day and age of AI, the Iranians and their pals have been putting out a lot of disinformation about what's happening in this war, and they're coupling it with AI videos to make it look real. They're like, hey, we got video of it. It's actually happening. Such as a report that came from, I believe it came from the Washington Post, or was it? It could have been CBS. Trying to remember. Wall Street Journal. Okay, no, it was Wall Street Journal. So the Wall Street Journal reports that, quote, 5 Air Force refueling planes hit an Iranian strike on Saudi Arabia, and talked about that 5 of our assets were badly damaged and taken out of commission. And Trump had to come out and say that was an intentional misleading headline. He said, in actuality, the base was hit a few days ago, but the planes were not struck or destroyed. 4 of the 5 had virtually no damage and are already back in service. One had slightly more damage, but will be in the air shortly. None were destroyed or close to that, as the fake news headline said. Let me see if I can get actually his full quote here. The full Truth Social post. He said, yet again, an intentionally misleading headline by the fake news media about the 5 tanker planes that were supposedly struck down at an airport in Saudi Arabia and of no further use. In actuality, the base was hit a few days ago, but the planes were not struck or destroyed. 4 of the 5 had virtually no damage and are already back in service, as I said. One had slightly more damage, but will be in the air shortly. None were destroyed or even close to that, as the fake news said in headlines. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal in particular, and other low-life papers and media actually want us to lose the war. Their terrible reporting is the exact opposite of the actual facts. They are truly sick and demented people that have no idea the damage they caused the United States of America. Fortunately, as proven by our great and conclusive election win in 2024, the people of our country understand what is happening far better than the fake news media. President Donald J. Trump. And then back to the Air Force One comments. He made similar comments to reporters, adding, quote, Iran is known for a lot of fake news, and they deal with our fake news. And I actually think it's pretty criminal because our media companies, who have no credibility whatsoever, are putting out information that they know is false, and it's a very dangerous thing for the country. I think they could be in serious jeopardy, frankly. And he's right, because depending on what the headline is, if the Wall Street Journal puts it out, if they're buying into Iranian propaganda, maybe they're not doing it intentionally, maybe they are. I would dare say they are. I dare say they knew that this wasn't a true story. They put that stuff out there, whatever the headline may be, and the markets could react to that. And they could react in a way that affects the gas prices. It makes the gas prices go up. And then, could you imagine? Can anybody imagine the media being able to dictate the price of gas? Can y'all picture that? The literal enemy of the people deciding. And so Donald Trump says, hey, I think they're in jeopardy. I don't know if that means that there's a new lawsuit incoming or what. But the people of this country that are concerned about, in particular, the price of gas, need to understand exactly what is going on and assess Iran's ability to hold the world's oil supply hostage. We'll give you some of that when we get back. 205-545-9950. It's the line, Talk 99.5. So I'm going to explain this. I'm going to explain this the best way I can. Iran earned over $65 billion from oil, petroleum products, and gas exports in the last fiscal year, while their total government revenues are projected to be around $45 billion, meaning their oil export earnings alone exceed their entire state budget. Right. So oil is very important to Iran. They sell about 80% of their oil to China. Beijing depends on a discounted Iranian crude oil to reduce manufacturing costs. Iranian crude ends up trading at around $8 a barrel below what the Brent crude price is, which is kind of, the standard, if you will. This discount helps lower production costs at a time when export volumes are at record highs, but profit margins are low. The share of loss-making Chinese manufacturers has doubled since 2018, and producer prices have fallen continuously for more than 3 years. So while Iran attempts to hold the world's oil supply hostage, the war itself is also restricting Iran's ability to export oil. Iran has sent at least 11.7 million barrels of crude oil through the Strait of Hormuz since the war began on February 28th, all of which were destined for China. However, shipments of approximately 1.2 million barrels per day are significantly lower than pre-war levels. Iran has exported 2.1 million barrels per day in February, which is the highest since July of 2018. Their only alternative export outlet, which is called the Jask facility on the Sea of Oman, which, as you know, is on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, has rarely been used. Loading a single very large crude carrier can take up to 10 days there compared to only 1 or 2 days at Karg Island, making it logistically marginal. It's kind of a no-brainer for them that they would much rather use Karg Island, take it through the Strait of Hormuz, and get it to China. The U.S., as you know, has struck more than 90 military targets on Karg Island, destroying naval mine storage facilities and missile storage bunkers, but deliberately avoided the oil infrastructure. Trump didn't want to blow that up. He wrote on Truth Social, he said, "For reasons of decency, I have chosen not to wipe out the oil infrastructure on the island. However, should Iran or anyone else do anything to interfere with the free and safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, I will immediately reconsider this decision." Karg Island processes 90% of Iran's crude exports. There was a CIA document from 1984 that described those facilities as the most vital in Iran's oil system, and their continued operation is essential to Iran's economic well-being, and there's no reason to believe that anything has changed on that front. Although some people want to believe that Iran is in a position of advantage with the Strait of Hormuz, it would be extremely easy for the president to crash Iran's economy and take a chunk out of China's economy with it. But Iran's social media, propaganda accounts are claiming that the IRGC they're going to allow safe passage for tankers whose oil was paid for in the Chinese yuan. Accounts for supporting the regime are portraying this as the death knell of the petrodollar and claiming that America's economic power is collapsing. But the one proposal is largely propaganda. Iran floated the idea, but China's own analysts have warned against it, saying, hey, we don't really need to do that. It's probably a bad idea. So both of those countries are in very bad shape.